The sun hung merciless and white in the cloudless sky over Copper Creek, baking the earth until it cracked like old leather. Heat shimmered off the dusty main street in waves that made distant buildings waver like mirages. It was the kind of day that drove sensible folks indoors, away from the punishing glare and the air so thick it felt like breathing through wet wool. But the marketplace was crowded despite the heat, because today was auction day. Wooden platforms lined the town square, each one displaying human cargo brought in from raids, wars, and the endless hunger of westward expansion. Men, women, and children stood in chains, while potential buyers circled like vultures, poking, prodding, inspecting teeth and muscles as if shopping for livestock. The air stank of sweat, fear, and something darker, the particular rot that comes from treating people as property. Auctioneers shouted their wares with practiced enthusiasm. Strong back, good with horses. Young, healthy, can cook and clean. Fresh from the territories, barely broken in. The crowd moved from platform to platform, making deals, counting coins, arguing over prices. This was business. This was the frontier. This was how things worked out here, where the law was whatever a man with enough gold said it was. And at the very end of the row, standing alone on the last platform like a monument to rejection, was Nita. She towered over everyone, buyers, sellers, even the auctioneer who'd been trying unsuccessfully to move her for 3 solid days. At well over 6 feet tall, with shoulders broad as a man's, and arms corded with lean muscle, she was a giant among the other captives. Her Apache heritage showed in every line of her face. High cheekbones, strong jaw, skin the color of burnished copper. Her long black hair hung in a thick braid down her back, and her dark eyes burned with an intensity that made grown men look away and mutter prayers under their breath. While other captives wept or pleaded or hung their heads in defeat, Nita stood straight as a lodgepole pine. Her chin was up. Her gaze was fixed on some distant point beyond the crowd, beyond the town, beyond this entire cursed situation. She didn't beg. She didn't cry. She simply endured with the patience of stone and the quiet fury of a caged mountain lion. $20. The auctioneer's voice had gone hoarse from 3 days of trying. Sweat poured down his red face, soaking his collar. Come on now, gentlemen. Look at the size of her. She could work your fields better than any 2 men, strong as an ox and twice as useful. A heavy-set rancher in dusty overalls spat a stream of tobacco juice into the dirt. Too damn big, too damn wild. I ain't bringing that into my house. She'd murder me first chance she got. Well now, she's for field work, not housework. The auctioneer tried desperately. Keep her chained up at night if you're worried. Chained or not, I ain't risking it. The rancher shook his head and moved on to inspect a smaller, more docile-looking woman on the next platform. A younger man with a thin mustache nudged his companion. Strong, though. Bet she could clear a whole field in a day. His friend snorted. Yeah, and scalp you while you sleep. She's Apache, Jim, full-blooded by the look of her. You know what they say about Apache women, meaner than the men and twice as dangerous. That's just talk. Is it? You remember what happened to the Henderson place? Found old Henderson with an arrow through his chest and his Apache housekeeper gone. They never did catch her. The friend lowered his voice. These ain't white women, Jim. These are savages. Bringing one home is asking for trouble. The word savage seemed to echo across the marketplace. Nita's jaw tightened imperceptibly, but her expression remained carved from granite. She'd heard it all before. Savage, heathen, animal, monster. The words didn't hurt anymore. They'd been said so many times they'd lost their sting, worn smooth like river stones. What hurt was the hunger gnawing at her belly, the thirst that made her tongue feel like old leather, the exhaustion that made her bones ache. She'd been standing on this platform for 3 days with minimal food and water, displayed like a curiosity at a traveling show. 3 days of being stared at, discussed, rejected. 3 days of wondering if death might not be preferable to this. The auctioneer wiped his face with a handkerchief that had long since given up any pretense of being clean. $15. I'm practically giving her away here. $15 for a worker who'll never tire, never complain, never... I'll take her. The voice cut through the marketplace noise like a knife through silk. Low, calm, absolutely certain. Every head turned. A man stood at the edge of the crowd, one boot resting casually on the bottom fence rail. He was lean and weathered, wrapped in trail dust and shadow. His clothes were worn but clean. Dark pants, a faded blue shirt, a vest that had seen better years. A gun belt sat easy on his hips, the holster well-oiled and positioned for a quick draw. His hat was pulled low, casting his face in shadow, but Nita could see his eyes, gray as storm clouds, steady as stone. Everything about him said he was a man who knew violence intimately and wore it comfortably. The auctioneer blinked in surprise, then scrambled to recover. You want her? The Apache woman? That's what I said. The stranger pushed away from the fence and walked forward with an easy, rolling gait that spoke of years in the saddle. His boots kicked up small puffs of dust with each step. As he moved into the sunlight, Nita could see his face more clearly, weathered by sun and hardship, probably in his early 30s, with lines carved deep around his eyes and mouth. A scar ran along his jaw, old and faded. This was a man who'd lived hard and survived harder. But his eyes, they were different from the others. Not cruel, not lustful, not even particularly interested. Just assessing. Like he was measuring the weight of a horse or judging the quality of leather. Nothing more. The crowd parted as he approached the platform. Whispers followed him like flies. Is that Ash Carter? Heard his wife died last winter. Poor bastard's been alone out there ever since. What's he want with an Apache woman? The stranger, Ash Carter, apparently, stopped at the base of the platform and looked up at Nita. For the first time since being captured, since being chained, since being displayed like meat at market, Nita looked directly at someone who'd come to buy her. Their eyes met, and something passed between them that neither could have named. A recognition, perhaps, or simply the acknowledgement of two people who'd both known loss and learned to carry it quietly. Name's Ash, he said, his voice pitched low enough that only she and the auctioneer could hear. Then he turned to the sweating man with the gavel. How much?
The auctioneer's hands trembled as he fumbled with his ledger. Well, sir, she's worth at least...
How much? Ash repeated, pulling a worn leather pouch from his belt. $10. Final offer. The auctioneer clearly expected to be haggled down even further. Ash counted out 10 silver dollars without hesitation, without negotiation, and dropped them into the man's palm. They clinked together with a sound like tiny bells. She's yours, Mr. Carter. The auctioneer practically threw the key at him. But I ain't responsible. Nobody asked you to be. Ash climbed onto the platform, his boots heavy on the old wood. He unlocked Nita's chains with quick, efficient movements. The iron fell away, clattering to the platform, and Nita rubbed her raw wrists, never taking her eyes off this strange man who'd just bought her for less than the cost of a decent horse. Ash stepped back down and started walking toward two horses tied at the hitching post. After a few steps, he paused and glanced back. You coming? It wasn't a command. It was a question. Nita stood frozen, her mind racing through possibilities. Run now? Wait for a better opportunity? Try to kill him and steal his horse? But something in the way he'd asked, casual, almost indifferent, made her feet move. She followed him to the horses. He untied a gray mare and handed her the reins without a word. Can you ride? Nita's eyes flashed. She'd been riding since she could walk. The corner of Ash's mouth lifted slightly. Not quite a smile, but close. Good. Long way to the ranch. He swung onto a buckskin stallion and gathered his reins, then looked down at her one more time. I ain't gonna chain you. I ain't gonna hurt you. But if you run, I won't chase. Understand? Nita said nothing. She simply mounted the mare in one fluid motion that drew a few impressed murmurs from the watching crowd.
As they rode out of Copper Creek, the sun finally beginning its descent toward evening, Nita kept her eyes forward and her options open.
She had no idea that this silent, gray-eyed cowboy was about to give her something she thought she'd lost forever. A reason to stay. The first rays of sunlight hadn't yet touched the horizon when Cade's eyes snapped open. Something was wrong. He'd learned to trust his instincts during the war, and right now, every nerve in his body screamed danger. He rolled out of his bedroll silently, reaching for the Winchester rifle propped against the wall. Through the window of his small ranch house, the world outside was still painted in shades of gray and shadow. Then he saw them. Warriors. Hundreds of them. They materialized from the pre-dawn darkness like ghosts, surrounding his property in a perfect circle. Some were on horseback, others on foot, but all were armed. Rifles, bows, lances, the weapons of a people who'd been fighting for their land since before Cade was born. His blood turned to ice water. In the back room, Winona still slept. He'd tended her wounds the night before, set her arm, which had indeed been broken, cleaned and bandaged her head wound, given her water and what little food he had. She'd been too exhausted to do anything but accept his help and fall into a deep sleep. Now her people had come for her. Cade moved to the door, his mind racing. 500 warriors, maybe more. He could see their breath in the cold morning air, white puffs that looked like dragon smoke. They hadn't attacked yet, which meant they wanted something, or someone. The door to the back room opened. Winona stood there, her arm bound in a makeshift sling, her face pale but composed. She looked past Cade to the window, and understanding flooded her features.
My father,
she whispered. Your father did this? Cade kept his voice low and steady, though his heart hammered against his ribs. He is Chief Ironclaw. When I did not return, she moved to the window, and Cade saw tears gathering in her eyes. He thinks you took me. He thinks that I'm like the others. Cade finished the thought. He'd heard the stories. White men taking Apache women, Apache warriors taking white women. An endless cycle of revenge and counter-revenge that had stained this land red for generations. Outside, a single warrior rode forward from the line. He sat tall on a painted warhorse, his face carved from the same stone as the canyon walls. Eagle feathers adorned his long black hair, and a necklace of bear claws hung across his chest. Even at a distance, Cade could see the resemblance to Winona. The same proud bearing, the same fierce intelligence in the eyes. Chief Ironclaw raised his hand, and the silence that fell was absolute. No bird sang. No wind blew. Even the desert seemed to hold its breath. Come out, white man! The chief's voice carried across the yard like thunder. His English was perfect, educated. Return my daughter, or your ranch burns with you inside it. Cade looked at Winona. What do you want me to do? She met his eyes, and he saw the conflict there. He will not believe you meant no harm. Too many lies from white men. Too much blood. I'm not lying. Cade set down his rifle, a gesture he hoped wouldn't get him killed, and moved toward the door. Stay here. No! Winona grabbed his arm with her good hand. You saved my life. I will not let you die for it.
Together, they stepped out onto the porch.
The sight that greeted them would have made a lesser man's knees buckle. 500 Apache warriors, maybe more, all focused on this single small ranch house. War paint gleamed in the growing light. Weapons bristled like porcupine quills. These were men who'd fought the Mexican army, the American cavalry, and every settler who'd tried to claim their land. They were survivors in a world that wanted them extinct. Chief Ironclaw's eyes found his daughter, and for just a moment, Cade saw the mask of the war chief crack. Relief flooded the older man's features, followed quickly by confusion when he saw Winona's injuries and her defensive stance beside the white man. "Daughter," Ironclaw said in Apache, then switched to English. "What has this man done to you?" Winona stepped forward, her voice strong despite her injuries. "He saved me, Father. I fell from the canyon edge. This man, Cade, he risked his life to pull me back. He tended my wounds. He gave me shelter." She paused, and her voice softened. "He showed me honor." A murmur ran through the assembled warriors. Ironclaw's expression didn't change, but Cade saw his knuckles whiten on his horse's reins. "White men speak of honor like coyotes speak of loyalty," Ironclaw said. "They offer one hand in peace while the other reaches for their guns." Cade raised his hands slowly, showing they were empty. "My gun is inside. I'm not reaching for anything except understanding, Chief. Your daughter is right. I found her hanging from that canyon, and I pulled her up. That's all. No tricks, no lies. Just one human being helping another." A younger warrior pushed his horse forward, his face twisted with rage. "Lies! White man lies. They killed my mother, my sisters. Now they steal our women and claim mercy." He spat on the ground. "Let me kill him now, Ironclaw." Other voices joined his, a chorus of anger and pain that had been building for generations. Cade could feel the situation spiraling out of control, could sense how close these men were to painting his ranch house with his blood.
Ironclaw raised his hand again, and silence returned, but it was fragile as glass.
The chief dismounted, his movements deliberate and controlled. He walked toward the porch, and every warrior tensed. Cade forced himself to stand still, to not reach for a weapon he didn't have, to trust in nothing but the truth and the woman beside him. Ironclaw stopped 10 feet away. His eyes moved from his daughter's bound arm to the bandage on her head, to her torn dress and bleeding fingers. Then those black eyes fixed on Cade with an intensity that seemed to see straight through flesh and bone to the soul beneath. "My daughter says you have honor," Ironclaw said quietly. "But words are wind. Honor must be proven, especially between our peoples, who have shed so much blood." Cade felt his mouth go dry. "What are you proposing?" The ghost of a smile touched Ironclaw's lips, but there was no warmth in it. "A test, white man. 3 tests in the tradition of my people. Pass them, and you will be recognized as a man of honor. My warriors will leave, and no harm will come to you." "And if I fail?" Ironclaw's smile vanished. "Then your ranch burns, and you with it. This is my offer. The only offer. Accept, or die where you stand." The sun finally broke over the horizon, painting the scene in gold and crimson. 500 warriors waited. Winona held her breath, and Cade stood at a crossroads between 2 worlds, knowing that whatever he chose next would change his life forever. He looked at the assembled warriors, at their faces hardened by loss and war. He looked at Winona, who'd trusted him enough to vouch for his character. He looked at Ironclaw and saw not just a chief, but a father trying to protect his people while maintaining his honor. Cade took a deep breath and straightened his shoulders. "I accept your test, Chief Ironclaw. All 3 of them." The die was cast. The Apache warriors parted like a sea as Iron Claw led Cade into the center of their circle. Winona followed, her father's stern glance unable to stop her. She'd defied him by speaking for the white man, and now she would see this through to whatever end awaited. Several elder warriors nodded to her with respect, while younger ones watched with barely concealed hostility. Cade's ranch house seemed impossibly small now, dwarfed by the sea of warriors surrounding it. The morning sun climbed higher, promising another scorching day. Sweat already traced lines down his spine, though he couldn't tell if it was from heat or fear. Iron Claw raised his arms, and the crowd fell silent. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of countless generations. "The white man Cade has agreed to face 3 tests," the chief announced in both Apache and English, ensuring all understood. "These are the trials our warriors face when they come of age. Courage, wisdom, endurance. If he passes, he walks free with honor. If he fails..." Iron Claw let the sentence hang unfinished. The implication was clear enough. An old warrior stepped forward, his face a roadmap of wrinkles and scars. He carried a ceremonial staff decorated with feathers and beads. This was the shaman, Cade realized, the keeper of traditions. The old man's eyes were clouded with age, but they saw everything. "The first test," the shaman intoned. "Courage." 4 young warriors led a horse into the circle, and Cade's stomach dropped. It wasn't just any horse. It was a wild Mustang stallion, coal-black, except for a white blaze on its face. The animal's eyes rolled white with fury, and its hooves struck sparks from the rocky ground. Ropes held it from 4 directions, and even then, it took all the warriors' strength to control it. "This horse has never been broken," Iron Claw explained. "Many have tried. All have failed. You must ride him until he accepts you, or until you can no longer stand. This proves courage." Cade studied the animal. He'd broken horses before back in Texas before the war. But this stallion was different. This was pure wildness made flesh, a creature that had never known a saddle or bit. Breaking it would be like trying to tame lightning. "How long do I have to stay on?" Cade asked. A thin smile crossed Iron Claw's face. "You will know when the test is complete. Or when you have failed." The warriors holding the ropes looked to their chief. Iron Claw nodded, and they brought the stallion closer. The horse's muscles rippled under its glossy coat, power barely contained. Its breath came in angry snorts, and foam flecked its muzzle. Cade approached slowly, hands visible, speaking in a low, calm voice. "Easy, boy. Easy now. Nobody wants to hurt you." The stallion's ears flicked toward him, but its eyes remained wild and suspicious. Cade had seen that look before, in men and animals alike. The look of something that had fought too hard for freedom to ever trust again. He reached for the horse's neck. Lightning quick, the stallion's head whipped around, teeth snapping inches from Cade's face. The watching warriors laughed, enjoying the show. Cade stepped back, his heart racing, and reconsidered his approach. This wasn't about domination. The Apache didn't break their horses the way white men did. They partnered with them. The test wasn't about forcing submission, but earning respect. Cade closed his eyes for a moment, steadying his breathing. When he opened them again, he looked at the horse differently, not as something to conquer, but as a fellow survivor in a harsh land. "I know," he said softly to the stallion. "I know what it's like to have everyone trying to break you, to make you into something you're not. But I'm not here to break you. I just need you to trust me for a few minutes. That's all." He moved in again, slower this time, and placed his hand on the horse's shoulder. The stallion tensed, but didn't strike. Cade ran his hand along the powerful neck, feeling the muscles bunch and relax under his touch. He began to hum an old cavalry tune, something he'd learned during the war, a melody that had once calmed spooked horses during artillery barrages. The warriors grew quiet, watching this strange interaction.
Without warning, Cade grabbed a handful of mane and swung himself onto the horse's back.
All hell broke loose. The stallion exploded like dynamite. It bucked, twisted, spun in circles that made the world blur. Cade's teeth rattled in his skull. His vision swam. He clamped his legs tight and grabbed more mane, holding on with everything he had. The horse reared up on its hind legs, pawing the air. Cade leaned forward, keeping his balance. When it came down, the impact jarred every bone in his body. Then the stallion tried a new trick, racing full speed toward the circle of warriors, who scattered like quail.
Cade stayed on.
The horse spun, bucked, and threw itself sideways. Dust rose in clouds around them. Time lost meaning. There was only the next second, the next heartbeat, the desperate struggle to remain in the saddle that didn't exist. Twice Cade nearly fell. Once his grip slipped and he hung sideways, saved only by hooking his leg over the horse's back. The warriors shouted, some cheering him on, others calling for his failure. He couldn't tell which was which anymore. His muscles screamed, his vision started to tunnel. Blood from a split lip filled his mouth, but he stayed on. Then something changed. The stallion's movements became less frantic, more testing. It still bucked, but with less fury. Cade realized the horse wasn't trying to throw him anymore. It was trying to understand him. He loosened his death grip slightly, trusting the animal, and began to move with its rhythm instead of fighting against it.
The bucking slowed, became a trot, then a walk.
Finally, the stallion stood still, sides heaving, covered in sweat. Cade sat on its back, barely conscious, his body one massive bruise. But he was still mounted. The silence was absolute. Iron Claw stepped forward, and something like respect flickered in his eyes. You have courage, he acknowledged. The first test is passed. Cade slid off the horse, his legs nearly buckling when they hit the ground. Winona rushed to steady him, ignoring her own injuries. The stallion didn't run away. Instead, it turned its head and regarded Cade with what might have been curiosity. Rest now, Iron Claw said. The second test begins at midday. Wisdom. They led Cade to the shade of a cottonwood tree near his well. Someone brought water, not from his well, but from their own supply, a gesture of grudging respect. Cade drank deeply, tasting blood and dust. You did well, Winona said quietly, sitting beside him. My father is impressed, though he would never show it. That was the easy one, wasn't it? Cade asked, watching the warriors prepare something in the center of the circle. Winona didn't answer, which was answer enough. The sun climbed higher, and Cade tried to gather his strength for whatever came next. Around him, 500 warriors waited, their judgment still hanging in the balance. He'd passed one test, but two remained, and he had the feeling that courage alone wouldn't be enough for what was coming. In the distance, a raven called out, a sound the Apache believed carried messages from the spirit world. Cade didn't know if that was true, but as he sat there battered and exhausted, he couldn't help wondering what message the raven might be carrying. The answer would come soon enough. The sun reached its zenith, and with it came a heat that could kill a man as surely as any bullet. Cade sat in the shade, his body a symphony of pain from the morning's ride. Every muscle ached, and his ribs screamed with each breath. But he was alive, and he'd earned a measure of respect from warriors who'd expected him to fall within seconds. Iron Claw approached with the shaman at his side. The old medicine man carried a leather pouch decorated with symbols Cade didn't recognize. Behind them, warriors had arranged 7 stones in a circle, each one painted with different markings. The second test, Iron Claw announced. Wisdom. The shaman opened his pouch and withdrew a handful of small bones. Bird bones, Cade guessed, each one carved with intricate designs. He scattered them across the ground within the stone circle, and they fell in a pattern that meant nothing to Cade, but seemed to hold significance for the gathered Apache. "A riddle," the shaman said, his voice like wind through dead leaves. "Answer correctly, and you pass. Answer wrong, and you fail all tests, no matter how well you rode." The crowd pressed closer. This test would be quick. Either Cade had the wisdom they sought, or he didn't. There would be no second chances, no time to learn. Just the riddle and his answer. The shaman studied the bones for a long moment, then looked up at Cade with those clouded eyes that somehow saw everything. "I am born in the mountain's heart, yet I flow through the desert. I give life, yet I can take it away. Warriors seek me when they thirst, but I cannot be held in any man's hands. I reflect the sky, yet I live in the earth. What am I?" Cade felt every eye upon him. The obvious answer was water. It fit most of the riddle. But something about the way the shaman had emphasized certain words made him hesitate. This was a test of wisdom, not just cleverness. The Apache didn't value quick answers. They valued right ones. He thought about the bones scattered in the circle, about the 7 painted stones. 7 was a sacred number in Apache culture. Winona had mentioned it last night while he tended her wounds. 7 directions: north, south, east, west, up, down, and center. The center of all things. I am born in the mountain's heart, yet I flow through the desert. Water came from mountains, yes, but so did something else. Something the Apache considered sacred. I reflect the sky, yet I live in the earth. Cade looked at the stones again, at their painted surfaces catching the sunlight. Then he looked up at the warriors' faces, at the paint they wore for ceremony and war, at the earth-tone pigments that came from clay. Cade said quietly. The shaman's expression didn't change, but several warriors stirred. Clay is born in the mountain's heart, in the deep places where rock becomes soil. It flows through the desert in the veins of the earth, in the arroyos after rain. It gives life because you use it to make vessels for water, for food, for ceremony. It can take life away because without it, you have no way to carry water across the desert. Warriors seek it when they thirst, not for itself, but for what it allows them to hold. It cannot be held in any man's hands. Not the raw clay, anyway. Not without form. It reflects the sky in its colors. The red of sunset, the white of clouds, the black of night. And it lives in the earth. Always. Even when shaped into something new. The silence stretched out like a rope pulled taut. Then the shaman nodded, once. "Wisdom," he said simply. Ironclaw's face remained impassive, but Cade saw him exchange a glance with the old medicine man. 2 tests passed. Only 1 remained. "Tonight," Ironclaw said, "when the sun sets, you will face the final test. Endurance. Rest now, white man. You will need your strength." As the warriors dispersed to prepare for the evening, a young Apache pushed through the crowd. He was perhaps 25, with a scar running from his left eye to his jaw. His face was a mask of barely controlled rage, and his hand rested on the knife at his belt. "Father," he addressed Ironclaw, though his eyes never left Cade, "this is foolishness. Tests will not change what the white man is. They killed my mother when they burned the village at Bear Canyon. They killed my younger sister when she tried to run. I found them in the ashes." His voice cracked. "And now we give this one honor? We treat him as if he is one of us?"
Night Shadow, Winona said gently, stepping forward. Cade is not those men. He dash quote. He is white.
Night Shadow's voice rose. That is enough! Or have you forgotten our people's pain, sister? Have you been with him so long that you now take their side? The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Other young warriors moved closer, their faces showing agreement with Night Shadow's words. These were men who'd lost family, lost homes, lost everything to white expansion westward. To them, Cade represented every injustice, every broken treaty, every murdered relative. Ironclaw raised his hand. The tests were agreed upon. They will be completed. No, Night Shadow said flatly. I challenge him. Now, let us see if his wisdom and courage mean anything when he faces an Apache warrior with a blade. Or does he only have honor when the test is controlled? The crowd erupted. Half the warriors shouted support for Night Shadow, while the other half looked to their chief. Ironclaw's face had gone stone hard, and Cade could see the impossible position the young warrior had put him in. If he refused the challenge, he looked weak. If he allowed it, the agreed-upon tests meant nothing. Cade made the decision for him. I accept, he said, standing up despite his protesting body. Winona grabbed his arm. No! You are injured, exhausted. This is not fair combat. None of this is fair, Cade replied quietly. But he's right about one thing. I can't just pass tests and expect that to change what I represent to these people. They need to see... He paused, searching for the right words. They need to see that I understand their pain. That I won't just fight to win, but that I know what's truly at stake here. Night Shadow had already drawn his knife, a wicked blade with a bone handle. The crowd formed a new circle, tighter this time, hungry for blood. This wasn't a test anymore. This was judgment. Someone tossed Cade a knife. He caught it, feeling its unfamiliar weight. It was shorter than Night Shadow's blade, and his hands were still torn from gripping the stallion's mane. But he'd been in knife fights before, during the war, in saloons and back alleys from Texas to New Mexico.
He'd survived them all, but he'd never fought someone with Night Shadow's reason for wanting him dead.
The two men circled each other. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly. Sweat stung Cade's eyes. Night Shadow moved like water, fluid and deadly, years of training evident in every step. Your people killed my family, Night Shadow said, his voice low and dangerous. Burned them alive while they slept. I was hunting, or I would have died with them. Every day I wake up, I see their faces in the smoke. Every night I hear their screams. He lunged suddenly, his knife flickering like a serpent's tongue. Cade barely dodged, feeling the blade whisper past his ribs. He didn't counterattack, just backed away, watching Night Shadow's eyes. I can't change what happened to your family, Cade said, and I won't insult you by saying I'm sorry, because words mean nothing against that kind of loss. Night Shadow attacked again, a combination of strikes that drove Cade backward. The young warrior was faster, fresher, and fighting with the fury of grief. Cade blocked one strike, dodged another, but the third opened a line of fire across his forearm. Blood dripped into the dust. The crowd roared. Then why fight? Night Shadow demanded, pressing his advantage. Why not just die and be done with it? One less white man in our land. Cade's back hit the circle of warriors. They pushed him forward, back into the fight. Night Shadow's blade came for his throat, and Cade caught the young warrior's wrist, stopping the knife inches from his jugular. They stood locked together, faces inches apart, both straining with effort. Because, Cade ground out, killing me won't bring them back. It won't heal anything. It'll just add my death to the pile of bodies between our peoples, and that pile is already too damn high. He shoved Night Shadow back and did something the young warrior didn't expect.
He dropped his knife.
The weapon fell to the dust between them, and Cade raised his empty hands. I won't kill you, Cade said. I could try. Maybe I'd succeed, maybe I wouldn't. But I won't. Because you're right. Your mother and sister, they deserved better. They deserved to live. And nothing I do can change that. But adding your death to theirs, that doesn't honor their memory. That just makes more widows, more orphans, more young men like you burning with rage that has nowhere to go, except into more killing. Night Shadow stood frozen, his knife still raised, his face twisted with confusion and anger. Kill me if you need to, Cade continued. If my death helps you sleep at night, if it quiets those screams you hear, then do it. But we both know it won't. We both know that tomorrow morning, you'll still wake up and they'll still be gone, and all you'll have added to this world is more death. The silence was absolute. 500 warriors held their breath. Winona's hand covered her mouth. Ironclaw watched with unreadable eyes. Night Shadow's knife hand trembled. Tears cut tracks through the dust on his face. I hate you, he whispered. I know, Cade said gently, and you have every right to. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then slowly, Night Shadow lowered his blade. He didn't sheath it, didn't drop it, but he lowered it. His shoulders shook with silent sobs, the grief he'd carried for so long finally breaking through the armor of rage. An older warrior, his uncle, perhaps, stepped forward and led Night Shadow away from the circle. The young man didn't resist, and he didn't look back at Cade. Ironclaw walked into the center of the circle. He looked at Cade, at the blood running down his arm, at the knife lying in the dust. When he spoke, his voice carried to every corner of the gathered crowd. The third test, he said, was not endurance of the body. It was endurance of the spirit. The test was mercy. And you have passed. The warriors began to lower their weapons, but the tension in the air remained thick as smoke. Ironclaw stood in the center of the circle, his weathered face catching the afternoon light. He looked from Cade to the place where Night Shadow had been led away, then to his daughter, and finally to the assembled warriors who had witnessed everything. I have lived 63 winters, the chief began, his voice carrying the weight of those years. I have fought in more battles than I can count. I have seen treaties made and broken. I have watched our hunting grounds shrink like water in the desert sun. I have buried friends, warriors, children. He paused, letting the words settle. And through it all, I have asked the spirits one question. When will it end? The warriors listened, some nodding, others standing rigid with barely suppressed emotion. These were men who had lost everything, piece by piece, to the westward tide of white settlement. The white men say they want peace, but they take our land. They say they want to share the earth, but they kill the buffalo and fence the water. They speak with two tongues, and we have learned not to trust their words. Ironclaw turned to face Cade directly. So when my daughter told me that a white man saved her life, that he showed her honor, I did not believe. How could I? How many times have we heard promises, only to find rifles aimed at our backs? Cade said nothing, letting the chief speak his truth. His arm still bled from Night Shadow's knife, but he made no move to bandage it. Some pains needed to be witnessed. But I am also a father, Ironclaw continued, his voice softening slightly. And when I saw my daughter standing beside you, defending you, I knew that something had changed. Not in the world. The world is still hard and cruel. But in this moment, in this place, something different had happened. The shaman stepped forward, his ancient eyes fixed on Cade. The tests were not truly tests, the old man said, his voice like wind through canyon walls. They were a mirror. We wanted to see what kind of man you were when everything was taken away. Your weapons, your advantages, your safety. We wanted to see if you would fight with honor, think with wisdom, and choose mercy when vengeance was easier. Many men could ride the horse, Ironclaw said. Fewer could answer the riddle. But the third test, he shook his head slowly. That test breaks most men. Even our own warriors struggle with it. To show mercy to someone who wants you dead, to lay down your weapon when every instinct screams to fight, that is not weakness. That is the hardest strength there is. He walked closer to Cade until they stood face to face. Up close, Cade could see the scars of old wounds, the lines carved by wind and worry, the eyes that had seen too much death. You could have killed Night Shadow, Ironclaw said. He gave you reason. He attacked you. No one would have blamed you for defending yourself. But you chose a different path. You chose to see his pain instead of just his knife. You chose to let him live, even knowing he might try again tomorrow. The chief placed his hand on Cade's shoulder. That is wisdom greater than any riddle. That is courage deeper than any test of strength. That is the kind of man who can maybe, just maybe, help us find a path forward. A murmur ran through the assembled warriors. Some nodded in agreement. Others looked uncertain, their grief and anger not so easily dismissed. But none raised their weapons. Winona moved to stand beside her father, her injured arm still bound, but her voice strong. The spirits brought me to that canyon's edge, she said. They brought Cade to save me. And they brought us all here, to this moment, to show us that we have a choice. We can continue the cycle of blood, or we can try something different. Pretty words, an older warrior called out. But words don't bring back the dead. Words don't return our stolen land. No, Cade agreed, speaking for the first time since the fight. They don't. And I won't stand here and pretend that one act of mercy erases generations of injustice. It doesn't. What happened to your people? What's still happening? It's wrong. And I'm just one man. I can't change the government in Washington. I can't bring back the buffalo or tear down the fences or restore what was taken. He looked around at the faces watching him, seeing the pain and suspicion there. But I can tell you this. On my land, on my ranch, any Apache who needs water can drink from my well. Any Apache who needs shelter from a storm can sleep in my barn. Any Apache who's hurt or hungry can find help at my door. It's not much. It's not enough. But it's what I have to offer. And when the cavalry comes, another warrior challenged. When they find Apache at your ranch, what will you do then? Cade met his eyes steadily. I'll tell them the truth. That these are my guests, under my protection, and if they don't like it, they can take it up with me. They'll kill you, the warrior said flatly. Maybe, Cade acknowledged. But at least I'll die standing for something right instead of living on my knees for something wrong. Ironclaw studied him for a long moment, then turned to address his warriors. We came here for my daughter. We came prepared for war, but the spirits have shown us something unexpected. A white man with honor. This does not change the world. This does not heal our wounds. But it is a beginning. He raised his voice. Let it be known that Cade is under the protection of the Apache. Any who harm him answers to me, and any Apache who needs help can seek it at his ranch without fear. The proclamation sent another ripple through the crowd. This was unprecedented, a white man being granted protection, being acknowledged as trustworthy. Some warriors looked pleased. Others looked troubled. But Ironclaw's word was law, and they would follow it. The chief turned back to Cade. You have passed 3 tests today, but life will test you many more times. The soldiers will not understand what happened here. Your own people may call you traitor. The peace between us is fragile as morning frost. He paused. Are you prepared for that? No, Cade admitted, but I'll face it anyway. Ironclaw almost smiled. Good. Honesty is the beginning of wisdom. He gestured to the shaman, who produced a small leather pouch and handed it to the chief. Ironclaw opened it and withdrew a single eagle feather, its white tip stained with red ochre. This is a gift, Ironclaw said, placing the feather in Cade's hand. It marks you as a friend of the Apache. Carry it, and our people will know you are under our protection. But remember, it also marks you as responsible. If you betray this trust, if you prove false, the consequences will be severe. I understand, Cade said, holding the feather carefully. The chief then turned to his daughter. And you, Winona. What is your choice? Everyone fell silent, waiting. This was the question that had hung unspoken over everything. Would the chief's daughter return to her people? Or would she stay with the white man who saved her?
Winona looked at her father, then at Cade, then at the vast assembly of warriors who had been her family, her people, her entire world. When she spoke, her voice was clear and certain.
I choose to stay, she said. Not because I turn my back on our people, Father, but because I want to be a bridge between our worlds. Someone must stand in the middle, must help both sides understand each other. Let me be that person. Ironclaw's face showed no emotion, but his eyes glistened. You were always the bravest of my children, he said quietly. Very well. Stay. Build your bridge. But remember, you will always have a place with your people. You are still my daughter, still Apache, no matter where you choose to live. He embraced her then, a brief but fierce hug that spoke of love and loss and letting go. When they parted, tears ran freely down Winona's face. The chief mounted his horse and raised his hand. We return to our lands. The white man has been tested and found worthy. Spread the word. Cade is a friend to the Apache. As one, the 500 warriors began to disperse. Some rode away immediately, while others lingered to catch a final glimpse of the white man who had shown them something they hadn't expected to find. The sun had begun its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Within an hour, the land around Cade's ranch was empty again, as if the warriors had been nothing but a dream. Only the tracks in the dust and the eagle feather in his hand proved otherwise. Cade and Winona stood together on the porch, watching the last riders disappear into the distance. The silence after so much tension was almost overwhelming. What happens now? Cade asked. Winona took his hand with her good one. Now we find out if 2 people from different worlds can build something new. It won't be easy. Many on both sides will oppose us. I know, Cade said. But maybe that's what courage really is. Not riding a wild horse or fighting in duels, but choosing to hope when hope seems foolish. They stood there as the sun touched the horizon, painting everything in gold and crimson. 2 people from 2 worlds, standing together at the edge of an uncertain future. Behind them was a history soaked in blood and betrayal. Ahead was a path no one had walked before. But as the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Cade felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Real, fragile, precious hope that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. The eagle feather in his hand caught the last light of day, its red-stained tip glowing like ember. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, The cavalry might come. Settlers might turn against him. The peace might shatter like glass. But tonight, under the vast western sky, a small miracle had occurred. Honor had been recognized. Mercy had been chosen. And two worlds had taken one small step toward each other. It was a beginning. And sometimes, that's all you need.